The music at my wedding reception softened just enough to let the voice of the MC cut through the room. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. I stood beside Ethan, my hands steady around a champagne glass. My dress fit perfectly. My hair was pinned the way Evelyn had practiced 3 times that morning. The room was full of people laughing, talking, shifting in their seats. My army friends stood near the bar. The Waverly kids chased each other between tables until Thomas gave them the look that meant business. Everything was exactly where it should be. Except the 2 people standing near the back wall. My biological parents. They hadn't been on the guest list. They hadn't been in my life for years. Yet here they were, pretending they belonged in a room built without them. Ethan leaned closer. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. And I was. Not nervous, not scared, just ready. The MC raised his microphone again. "Before we continue tonight, we'd like to recognize the parents of the bride." My mother's posture straightened immediately. Old habits. She was preparing to step forward and accept a role she believed she still owned. But before he could say another word, everything in my mind snapped backward. Not to years ago, not to childhood, to one phone call, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my apartment near Fort Eustis, folding uniforms into a duffel bag. My flight home was booked. My leave paperwork was approved. I had exactly 96 hours to pretend I still belonged to a family that didn't know what to do with me. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Vanessa. My sister never called without a reason. Usually that reason was to inform me of something that had already been decided. I answered. "Hey, Ness." Her voice came through sharp and efficient like she'd rehearsed. "Don't come home for Thanksgiving." I thought I misheard. "What Mom asked me to tell you. She doesn't want to deal with your reaction." Dad agrees. "It's better if you stay where you are." There was no hesitation in her tone, no apology, no softness, just a delivery. I tightened my grip on the phone. Why? Vanessa sighed like I was wasting her time. "Because Mom's stressed. I'm stressed. We don't need drama this year." Drama, that word again. It had followed me my entire life like a label someone else stuck on my forehead. "Vanessa." I said I just booked the flight yesterday, then cancel it. Click. She didn't even wait for my response. I stood in the kitchen staring at my duffel bag. My uniforms were folded neatly, each one representing a role I knew how to play. Soldier, officer, responsible adult. Daughter was the only role that never came with clear instructions. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice was light, cheerful, like nothing had happened. "Mom, why is Vanessa telling me not to come home?" A pause, just long enough to confirm everything. "Your sister is overwhelmed," she said. "And honestly, Riley, you can be intense. This holiday needs to be calm. I haven't been home in 6 months. I know, I haven't argued with anyone. I know. Then what exactly am I doing wrong?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You always make things about you," she said. "We're just trying to keep peace in the family." There it was, the familiar pivot. No matter what happened, the conclusion was the same. If I questioned it, I was the problem. "Mom," I said, "are you actually telling me not to come home?" A small sigh, not regret, annoyance. "Yes, it's better this way." I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I called my father. He picked up after several rings, the TV murmuring in the background. "Hey kiddo, Dad." "Did Mom ask Vanessa to call me?" Silence. A breath. The sound of someone choosing comfort over courage. "Yes," he said, "and you're okay with that." Another silence. Longer. "Your mother just wants a quiet holiday." "So do you want me there?" I asked the question directly because I knew if I wrapped it in politeness, he'd slip around it. He didn't answer right away. Then softly, almost apologetically, he said, "It's better if you listen to your mother this time." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Okay, Dad," and ended the call. The apartment felt suddenly larger. Too much empty space. I walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and hung my uniforms back where they belonged. Not because I had to, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Images came fast and clear. My commissioning ceremony, rows of proud families, cameras flashing, my name called, my parents' seats empty because Vanessa had a rough day, my promotion ceremony 2 years later. They arrived late, walking in during the applause. My mother whispering afterward, "You didn't have to look so disappointed." Every time I'd asked for something simple. Attention, fairness, explanation. I'd been told I was dramatic. Standing there in my bedroom, I understood something without fireworks or dramatic music. No version of me would ever be small enough for that family. My phone buzzed again, a text from Vanessa. Please don't start anything. We're just trying to have a nice holiday. I deleted it. Then I sat on the edge of my bed staring at a suitcase I no longer needed and a plane ticket I wasn't going to use. I didn't make a speech to myself. I didn't vow revenge. I didn't promise transformation. I just sat there breathing slowly, realizing that for the first time in my life, I had no idea where I belonged. The room was quiet. My phone stayed silent. The uniform in the closet hung crisp and ready, waiting for a mission I understood. Family had never come with that kind of clarity. The MC's voice at the wedding echoed faintly in the back of my mind, still waiting to finish his sentence, while the memory of that night stayed sharp and unfinished, sitting right where it started in the moment my place at a table was taken away. I stayed on that bed longer than I meant to, staring at a suitcase that would never make it to the airport, feeling something settle in my chest that wasn't anger or sadness. It was recognition, like finally reading the fine print on a contract I'd signed as a child. Because this hadn't started with Thanksgiving. It had started long before I knew what the word drama even meant. I was 10 the first time I understood that my sister's feelings weighed more than mine. Vanessa came home from school crying because a friend didn't sit with her at lunch. My mother dropped everything to hold her, stroke her hair, whisper reassurances. I stood in the doorway with a scraped knee from falling off my bike, blood running down my shin. Mom glanced at me once. Go wash it off, she said. Your sister needs me right now. I remember nodding, not because I agreed, because I knew asking for more would make me difficult. By middle school, the pattern was set. Vanessa forgot her homework. The teacher was unfair. Vanessa didn't get invited to a party. Other girls were jealous. Vanessa snapped at me. I must have provoked her. Every conflict ended in the same place. Me apologizing, Vanessa receiving comfort. My father watching from the couch, eyes fixed on the TV, pretending neutrality while never stepping in. When I got older, I tried a new strategy: excellence. If I couldn't be the favored child, I'd be the impressive one. Straight A's, student council, volunteering. I thought achievements were measurable. Love felt random. The day I told them I'd been accepted into an ROTC program, my mother blinked like I'd spoken another language. The military, she asked. Why? Because I want to serve, I said. And they're offering a full scholarship. My father smiled. A small one but real. That's my girl. Vanessa crossed her arms. So you're just leaving, she said. Guess we're not good enough for you. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. From that moment on, every success I had was treated like a betrayal. I was moving away. I was choosing a different life. I was becoming someone they couldn't control. My commissioning ceremony was supposed to be a proud day. I stood in uniform on a field lined with folding chairs, sunlight glaring off polished shoes. Families hugged their new officers. Parents cried. Cameras flashed. My parents' seats were empty. Vanessa had called that morning. She had a panic attack, my mother said later. We couldn't leave her alone. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I didn't throw anything. I just nodded, swallowed the tightness in my throat, and shook hands with officers who didn't know the war being fought inside my own family. After the ceremony, my mother called. Stop sulking, she said. You got your moment. Don't make everything about you. I told myself she was right. Maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe family meant sacrificing attention. Maybe love wasn't something you felt. Maybe it was something you assumed. 2 years later, I pinned on Captain. This time they came, 40 minutes late. Walking down the aisle while applause was already fading, my mother hugged me quickly. We almost didn't make it, she said. Vanessa was upset again. I stared at her, not because I didn't believe her, because I did, and that was the problem. At dinner afterward, Vanessa scrolled through her phone while I sat in uniform beside a cake that read, Congratulations, Riley, in blue icing. My father raised a glass. To family, he said. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Can we not make everything about Riley for once? Everyone laughed awkwardly. I laughed too. Because if I didn't, I'd be proving their point. By the time I deployed for the first time, the expectations were clear. Call home often, ask about Vanessa. Don't talk too much about myself. Don't share difficult experiences. Don't show emotion. Don't complain. When I missed one weekly call because I was on a 14-hour shift, My mother left a voicemail. "You really need to think about your priorities," she said. "Your sister worries about you more than you know." I stared at the phone in a tent half a world away and wondered how worry had turned into ownership. When I came home on leave, Vanessa introduced me to her friends as my sister, the army girl, like a character trait, not a person. At dinner that night, she said, "You always get so intense when you talk about work. It's a little much." My mother nodded. "She means well," she said. "Just don't overwhelm people." I learned to speak less, smile more, keep my sentences short, hide any feeling that might be inconvenient. By my late 20s, I was an expert at minimizing myself. I walked into rooms already bracing to be too loud, too ambitious, too serious, too sensitive, too something, and every time I tried to name what was happening, the response was the same. "You're reading too much into it. You're being dramatic. You always make yourself the victim." After a while, you start to believe it, or at least pretend you do, because fighting the label takes more energy than living under it. Sitting on my bed with a canceled flight and a quiet phone, I finally saw the pattern without the emotional noise. It wasn't that I was dramatic. It was that my presence required them to pay attention. And attention was a limited resource in a house where one child had claimed it as her birthright. I didn't come to this realization with triumph. There was no swelling music, just a simple thought, clean and sharp. If I had to shrink to stay in this family, there would eventually be nothing left. I lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater and the distant sound of cars outside. The world kept moving, my career kept moving, my life kept moving. Only one thing was standing still, the role I had been trying to play at a table that had never truly saved me a seat. I pushed myself off the bed and stood because lying there wasn't going to change anything. I opened the closet again, stared at my uniforms, then closed the door, not angrily, just firmly. I didn't need them for a flight home anymore. Thanksgiving morning arrived quietly, no rushing to airports, no family group chat, no safe travels texts, just gray light slipping through my blinds and the faint sound of a neighbor's TV playing a parade I wasn't watching. I brewed coffee. It tasted bitter, or maybe I told myself I could cook something. I told myself I could ignore the holiday. I told myself it was just another day. By noon, the apartment felt too small and too silent. I grabbed my coat, slipped on a simple army sweatshirt, and drove with no real plan. I just knew I didn't want to sit alone in a kitchen pretending this didn't hurt. Norfolk traffic moved slowly, full of cars, loaded with covered dishes, and children in the back seat. Families heading somewhere warm and loud. I followed the flow until I saw a familiar sign, Salt and Pine Tavern. I'd eaten there once during training months earlier. Good food, casual, always open on holidays for military folks who couldn't go home. The parking lot was almost full. I hesitated in the car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, reminding myself I wasn't going inside to make a statement. I was going inside to eat. That was all. Warm air and the smell of roasted turkey hit me as soon as I stepped through the door. Laughter echoed off wooden beams, glasses clinked. A kid dropped a fork. Someone cheered at a football game playing on a TV in the corner. The hostess smiled. "Just one today." Her voice was kind, but I heard the question anyway. Just one. She led me past tables crowded with plates, grandparents, cousins, toddlers in tiny sweaters, every chair filled, every conversation layered on top of another. She stopped at a small table by the window. "Your server will be right with you." I sat down and placed my phone beside my plate. No notifications, no missed calls, no text saying Happy Thanksgiving. I stared at the menu without reading it. My eyes kept drifting to a large table nearby. 3 generations. An older couple at the center, 2 adult children with spouses. Kids passing rolls and stealing olives from a shared plate. They interrupted each other, teased each other, argued about the best football team. Ordinary family chaos. I felt a tightness in my chest that wasn't jealousy. It was grief. For something I'd never actually had, but had spent my life pretending I did. The server came. "Thanksgiving special," I nodded. When the food arrived, it looked perfect. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce shaped like it came from a can, and proud of it. I took a bite. I couldn't taste anything. I picked up my phone. Muscle memory told me to open social media. I knew I shouldn't. I did anyway. Vanessa's post was right at the top. A picture of my parents. Vanessa, her boyfriend, and their dog wearing a ridiculous turkey bandana. Everyone smiling, everyone pressed close. No empty chair, No absence acknowledged. The caption read, "Family first. Grateful for love and peace this year. Peace." I stared at the screen thumb hovering over the like button out of habit. Then I locked the phone and set it face down. They weren't just eating without me. They were celebrating the quiet that came from excluding me. I sat very still, shoulders squared, jaw tight, forcing myself not to cry in the middle of a crowded restaurant. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself everything I'd been trained to tell myself for years. Don't be dramatic. But something different happened this time. Instead of shrinking, I watched. I watched the family beside me pass dishes without asking. I watched the grandmother wipe mashed potatoes off a kid's cheek. I watched the grandfather lean back, content listening to the noise he didn't need to control. No one at that table was walking on eggshells. No one was afraid of being too much. This is what family looks like, I thought. Not perfect, just safe. My throat tightened. A tear escaped despite my best effort to stay composed. I grabbed my napkin, dabbing quickly, turning toward the window, as if the street outside was suddenly fascinating. "Honey," the voice was warm, close. I turned slightly. The woman from the large table stood beside me. Silver hair, clear eyes. The kind of face that had lived through things and come out softer, not sharper. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said automatically. She smiled gently. "I've been alive long enough to know that's not true." I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "I'm just having a weird holiday," I admitted. She glanced at my untouched plate, then back at me. No one should eat Thanksgiving dinner alone. Before I could answer, she added, "Come sit with us." I shook my head quickly. "Oh, I don't want to intrude." "You wouldn't be intruding," she said. "You'd be joining." She turned slightly and called toward her table. "Thomas, move that chair." An older man waved in my direction, already pulling a chair out. "Trust me," he said. "She doesn't take no for an answer." The kids at the table stared, openly curious, but not uncomfortable. The adults smiled like they'd seen this before. I looked at my plate, my lonely table, my phone face down like a piece of evidence. Then I looked at the open chair. My feet moved before my brain decided. I picked up my napkin, stood, and followed her. No speech, no dramatic exit, just one quiet choice. As I sat down among strangers passing me a warm roll and a glass of water, I felt something shift. Not healed, not fixed, just different. Like for the first time in my life, I had stepped into a room where I didn't need to make myself smaller to stay. I wrapped my fingers around the warm roll they handed me like it was something fragile I didn't quite deserve yet. A glass of water appeared in front of me, then mashed potatoes. Then someone slid a serving spoon my way without asking if I wanted any. They just assumed I did. It was such a small thing, but my chest tightened anyway. "I'm Evelyn," the woman who invited me said. Sitting beside me like this was normal. "This is my husband, Thomas, our son, Daniel, his wife, Karen, their kids, and our youngest, Ethan." Everyone waved. No one stared too long. No one asked why I was alone. No one demanded an explanation for my presence. I cleared my throat. "I'm Riley. Nice to meet you, Riley," Thomas said. "We're loud, we interrupt each other, and we argue about football every year. You'll fit right in," Daniel grinned. "Dad's lying. We argue about everything." The kids giggled. One of them passed me a basket of rolls again like I hadn't just taken one. Ethan sat across from me, around my age, relaxed posture, easy smile. He raised his glass. "Welcome to the chaos." I smiled back, unsure what else to do. For the first few minutes, I barely spoke. I just watched. They teased each other. They shared food. They complained about traffic and work and the price of groceries. No one performed. No one monitored their tone. No one shrank. At one point, a kid knocked over a cup. Karen grabbed napkins. Thomas joked that this was the annual tradition. Daniel said it happened twice last year. Everyone laughed. No one got angry. No one shamed the child. No one called anyone dramatic. I realized how foreign that felt. Evelyn leaned closer. "So Riley, what do you do?" "I'm in the army," I said. Thomas raised his eyebrows. "Well then, we're honored." Daniel nodded. "Thank you for your service." Their gratitude wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't performative. It was simple and direct. I'd heard those words 1,000 times from strangers in airports. Somehow hearing them here at a table I wasn't supposed to be at hit differently. Ethan tilted his head. "You stationed nearby Fort Eustis," I said. "I'm on leave." Karen looked at my empty plate. And you were going to spend Thanksgiving alone. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't know how to answer without sounding like I was accusing someone. Evelyn noticed. She didn't push. She just said, "Well, I'm glad you walked through that door." Halfway through dinner, I realized I was eating. Actually eating. Not pushing food around. Not pretending. Just eating, talking, listening. Existing without calculating my every word. When dessert came, Thomas stood and announced pumpkin pie, pecan pie, and whatever this is that Karen insisted was a good idea. Karen rolled her eyes. "It's apple. It's normal." Thomas whispered loudly to me, "She's lying." I laughed. A real laugh. Loud enough that Ethan looked up and smiled like he'd been waiting to hear it. For a moment, I forgot my phone existed. I forgot the photo Vanessa posted. I forgot the empty seat that never had my name. After dinner, people started gathering coats. Kids yawned, plates stacked, leftovers wrapped. It felt natural, comfortable, like a memory I should have had years ago. I stood suddenly unsure again, because I didn't know how to leave without making it awkward. Evelyn solved it for me. She walked me toward the front of the restaurant while the others bundled up behind us. Then she reached into her purse and handed me a small cream-colored card. Evelyn Waverly, retired JAG attorney, phone number, address. "If you ever need someone to talk to," she said, "call me." I looked at the card. "That's very kind, but you don't even know me." She smiled. "I know enough, and I mean it." Thomas stepped up beside her. "We do Sunday dinners every week. You're welcome anytime," Ethan added. "And don't worry, Mom's invitations come with lifetime warranties." I shook my head slightly. I don't want to impose. Evelyn's expression softened but stayed firm. "Riley, you're not imposing. You're invited." The word hit differently than I expected. Invited, not tolerated, not managed, not squeezed in between someone else's needs. Invited. Outside, the cold air cut through my coat. Snow dusted the sidewalk. I stood by my car holding a business card from a woman I met 3 hours ago, and an invitation I hadn't asked for. I didn't make promises. I didn't swear I'd come. I just nodded. "Thank you," I said. "Really." Evelyn touched my arm briefly, like sealing a quiet agreement. "Drive safe." I got into my car and sat there with the engine off. My phone lit up with another social media notification I didn't open. Instead, I stared at the business card in my hand. A name, a number, a door I didn't know existed that had just been opened. I started the engine and drove back through streets lined with houses glowing warm behind curtains. Families finishing meals, kids falling asleep in back seats, couples arguing over directions. Normal life, real life, not perfect, just lived. When I reached my apartment, I didn't feel fixed. I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel like I'd found a replacement for anything. I just felt something new. A thin line where emptiness had been. Not hope, not yet. Just the knowledge that one night, one table, one invitation had changed the shape of my silence. I held the business card in my hand the next morning while my coffee brewed. Evelyn Waverly, retired JAG, neat handwriting, clean edges. Nothing about it looked dramatic or life-changing. It was just a card. I set it beside my sink and told myself I wouldn't call. People invited strangers to dinner out of politeness all the time. It didn't mean anything. It was just kindness in a moment. I didn't want to cling to it and look needy. 2 days passed, then 5, then a week. My phone stayed quiet. No missed calls from home, no messages asking how my holiday went. Silence had become the family language. On Sunday afternoon, I found myself staring at the card again. I didn't call. I drove. I told myself I'd just stop by, say hello, drop off a thank you, then leave before it got weird. The Waverly house sat on a quiet street in Virginia, with a porch swing and a flag hanging beside the door. It looked lived in, not perfect, just real. I stood on the porch for a full minute debating retreat. Then the door opened. Evelyn smiled like she'd been expecting me at that exact moment. "There you are," she said. "Come in, dinner's almost ready." No hesitation, no surprise. No questions about why I came or why I'd waited a week. Inside the house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic. Thomas sat in a recliner, arguing with a football commentator. Daniel was helping his kids with homework at the kitchen table. Karen was stirring something on the stove. Ethan was setting plates. No one stopped to stare at me like I'd interrupted something private. Karen waved. "Riley, grab a seat." I did. That first Sunday dinner was simple. Chicken, vegetables, store-bought pie. Conversation about work, school, and how Thomas refused to admit he needed reading glasses. No one asked about my parents. No one pried into my life. They let me speak when I wanted and stay quiet when I didn't. When it was time to leave, Evelyn hugged me at the door. "Same time next week," she said. It wasn't a question. I didn't commit. I just said I'll try. I came back anyway. Not every week at first. Sometimes training ran late. Sometimes I told myself I was too tired. Sometimes I worried I was pushing my way into a family that wasn't mine. But every time I skipped a Sunday, my phone would buzz with a simple text from Evelyn. "Hope you're okay. Doors always open. No guilt. No pressure. Just consistency." Slowly, I stopped bracing myself at the door. I stopped rehearsing explanations for my presence. I started showing up with a bottle of soda or a bag of bread. Small contributions so I didn't feel like a charity case. The kids started calling me Aunt Riley without anyone instructing them to. Thomas saved me the corner seat at the table automatically. Karen asked my opinion on recipes like it mattered. Daniel asked about my career without making jokes about me being too intense. Ethan and I fell into easy conversations. Movies, work, dumb stories from childhood. No flirting, no expectation, just comfortable space. One Sunday, a kid spilled juice across the table. I instinctively tensed, waiting for criticism or blame. Instead, Karen handed the child a towel. "Let's clean it up," that was it. No sigh, no lecture, no comment about being careless. I realized I'd been living my whole life waiting for punishment that never came in this house. Outside the Waverly home, my military life kept moving. Training cycles, field exercises, early mornings, long days, chain of command, clear expectations, clear consequences. In that world, I knew exactly who I was. At a leadership course, my senior NCO Sergeant First Class Dana Brooks watched me run a drill. Afterward, she pulled me aside. "You're good," she said, "but you apologize too much." I blinked. "I'm just trying to be respectful." "Respect doesn't require shrinking," she said. "A leader sets boundaries. If you don't, people walk all over you." I nodded, pretending I understood. She leaned in slightly. "This isn't just about the army, Captain. This is life." That sentence stuck. A week later, my mother finally called. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then she texted, "Call me, no greeting, no how are you, no apology for Thanksgiving, just command." My thumb hovered over the call button. I thought about Evelyn's kitchen, Thomas passing bread, Karen wiping juice off the table, kids laughing, Ethan arguing that Die Hard was a Christmas movie. I put my phone down. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for not answering. The next Sunday, Evelyn noticed my quiet mood. "You okay?" she asked gently. "I think so," I said. I just didn't call someone back. She didn't ask who, she didn't ask why, she just nodded. "Sometimes peace is choosing not to engage," she said. That night, driving back to base, I realized something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. I was learning that love didn't have to be earned. Belonging didn't require self-erasure. And boundaries weren't cruelty. They were clarity. I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel finished. But I felt something new settling into place. A life that didn't revolve around proving I deserved to exist. I turned off my car outside the barracks and sat there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, realizing I hadn't checked my phone once during the drive. That alone told me something had changed. Monday morning came fast, PT at dawn, cold air biting through my jacket, boots hitting pavement in rhythm. This was the part of my life that had always made sense. Clear rules, clear expectations, clear rank, no guessing games. After formation, Sergeant First Class Dana Brooks walked beside me toward the parking lot. "You're carrying yourself different lately," she said. I glanced at her. "Different how?" "Like you're not waiting for permission to exist," she replied. "About time." She didn't say it kindly, she said it like a fact, and I appreciated that. The week settled into a pattern: training, paperwork, range days, Sunday dinners, and somewhere in that rhythm, Ethan Waverly became part of my normal without me noticing the moment it happened. He didn't text every day. He didn't show up with grand gestures. He was just there, at the table, washing dishes without being asked, fixing the porch step when it creaked, listening more than he talked. One Sunday, Thomas asked me about my job in more detail. I explained a training schedule, upcoming field exercise, leadership challenges. Halfway through, I stopped talking, expecting the familiar reaction. the glazed eyes, the comment about me being intense. But Thomas just nodded. That's a lot of responsibility, he said. Your soldiers are lucky to have you. No sarcasm, no dismissal. Later that evening, Ethan walked me to my car. You talk about the army like it matters, he said. It does, I replied. He smiled. That's not a bad thing, Riley. No one had ever said that to me before, not in those words. 2 weeks later, everything shifted slightly. I had a late-night emergency call at base. A soldier under my command had a family crisis back home. Paperwork, phone calls, chain of command. I didn't leave my office until almost midnight. When I walked out into the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Saw Mom said you might be working late. Just checking you got home safe. No demand, no expectation. No follow-up questions, just care given quietly. I texted back. Still at base, heading out now. Drive safe. I'll sleep better knowing you are. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. It didn't feel intrusive. It didn't feel controlling. It felt steady. A few days later, I got news I'd been selected for a temporary duty assignment at a training center a few hours away. 3 months, long days, new unit, new expectations. When I told the Waverleys at Sunday dinner, Karen looked concerned. That's far, she said. Thomas asked logistics questions. Evelyn asked if I wanted help packing. No one said, you're leaving us too. No one made it about themselves. Ethan didn't speak right away. After dinner, he walked me to the porch, so he said, hands in his pockets. Looks like we'll be calling more than talking in person for a while. I waited for a complaint. None came. I'd like that, I said. He nodded once. Good. The assignment was intense. Long days. New soldiers. Tight deadlines. I threw myself into it because that's what I knew how to do. Some nights I'd come back to my temporary quarters and feel the old familiar emptiness pressing in. The instinct to call home, to explain, to try again. Instead, my phone would buzz. A picture of Thomas burning something on the grill. A video of the kids arguing over a board game. A text from Evelyn thinking of you. Eat something real tonight. A one-line message from Ethan. You crossed my mind today. No pressure, no guilt, no obligation, just presence. Halfway through the assignment, a scheduling mistake left me stuck at a training site 2 hours from my lodging with no transport back. I called base support. No answer, it was late. I weighed my options. Then I called Ethan. I didn't over-explain. I didn't apologize for calling. I'm stuck, I said. Any chance you're near this area, I'll be there in 2 hours, he said. He didn't ask why I'd called him instead of someone else. He didn't joke about it. He just showed up. Drove 2 hours, picked me up, bought me a gas station coffee that tasted like regret, and drove me back without turning it into a story about how much he'd sacrificed. In the car at 2 a.m, he said, You don't have to do everything alone, you know. I stared out the window at dark highways and thought about every time I'd been told I was too much for needing anything. I'm learning that, I said. By the time my assignment ended, the idea of returning to Sunday dinner felt less like visiting someone else's family and more like returning to a place where I didn't have to armor up. That night, back at the Waverly house, Thomas handed me a plate before I even sat down. Karen poured me a drink. The kids showed me a terrible magic trick. Evelyn touched my shoulder in passing a simple gesture of welcome. Ethan sat across from me, catching my eye once. No dramatic moment, no declaration, no music swelling. Just a shared look that said without pressure or expectation, I'm here. For the first time in my life, being chosen didn't feel like something I had to earn. It felt like something being offered freely. And I didn't run from it. I set my duffel bag by the door and kicked off my boots, glad to be back in my own apartment after the temporary assignment. The place smelled like nothing. No roast chicken, no kids' shampoo, no old wood floors, just clean, empty air. I didn't feel lonely. Not exactly, but the silence felt sharper now that I knew what warmth sounded like. My phone buzzed. Ethan. Welcome back. Sunday dinner, no excuses. I smiled and typed back, Yes, sir. That Sunday, the Waverly house was louder than usual. Daniel had brought a new board game. Karen was already annoyed by the instructions. Thomas claimed the rules were stupid. Evelyn declared they were playing anyway. Halfway through dinner, Ethan caught my eye. Hey, he said. Can you come with me for a minute? He led me outside to the porch. The air was cool, the sky clear, no dramatic setup, no suspicious kneeling, just Ethan leaning against the railing, I've been thinking, he said. A lot. I crossed my arms, unsure where this was going. I like having you around, he said. Not just at dinner, in general. I waited. I'd learned not to fill silence with self-protection. He took a breath. I want to keep choosing you, if you'll let me. He didn't pull out a ring. He didn't make a speech. He just said it plainly, like it was the most logical thing in the world. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel like I needed to perform gratitude. I felt calm. I'd like that, I said. He smiled. No fireworks, no audience, just an agreement between two adults who had watched each other long enough to know what they were agreeing to. From that point on, things slid into place quietly. Ethan started coming to base events when he could. I went to his work gatherings and nodded politely at architecture talk I barely understood. We shared groceries weekends, inside jokes, and the unspoken understanding that neither of us needed to rescue the other. Months later, on a random Tuesday evening, we sat on my couch, eating takeout. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Before you say anything, he said, I want you to know this isn't pressure. It's an invitation. He opened the box. The ring was simple, tasteful, nothing flashy, just intentional. I want to spend my life choosing you, he said. Will you marry me? I didn't cry, I didn't gasp, I didn't need a moment to decide. Yes, I said. He slipped the ring onto my finger like he'd practiced, because he probably had. We ordered dessert to celebrate. No dramatic phone calls to family, no sudden rush to announce anything, just us eating chocolate cake on the couch. Later that night, after Ethan left, I sat at my desk with a notebook and started writing down wedding ideas, venue, guest list, music, food. Then I hit a line and froze. Parents of the bride. I stared at the blank space. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a practical problem that needed solving. I tried writing Deborah and Michael Hart. My hand stopped. It didn't feel correct. Not emotionally, not honestly. They hadn't called in months. They hadn't asked how I was. They hadn't apologized. They hadn't acknowledged anything. Writing their names felt like giving credit where none was due. I crossed the line out. I thought about calling my mother, just to inform, just to be polite, just to avoid future accusations. I picked up my phone, opened her contact. Mom. The same word that had once meant comfort, then obligation, then discomfort. My thumb hovered over the call button. I imagined the conversation. Why didn't you tell us sooner? You're overreacting. You're punishing us. You're breaking the family. I set the phone back down, not with anger, with clarity. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was simply not inviting people who had removed themselves from my life. That night I lay in bed looking at the ring on my finger. Not as a symbol of rescue, not as proof of worth, just as a promise between two people who chose each other without conditions. Sunday dinner came again. Evelyn noticed the ring immediately. She smiled, eyes softening. Well, she said, that explains why Ethan's been pacing for weeks. Thomas clapped Ethan on the back. Daniel whistled. Karen hugged me. The kids demanded to see the ring and declared it very shiny. No one asked if my parents knew. No one questioned whether I should involve them. No one made me justify my choices. Later, Evelyn poured tea and sat beside me. You're very quiet, she said. I'm thinking about wedding invitations, I replied. She nodded, once understanding more than I said out loud. Whatever you decide, she said, you won't make the wrong choice by honoring what's true. That sentence stayed with me. Not advice, not instruction, just permission to trust myself. Driving home that night, I rolled down the window and let cold air hit my face. I wasn't bracing for conflict. I wasn't preparing explanations. I wasn't rehearsing apologies. I was planning a wedding. And for the first time, the life ahead of me felt like something I was building, not something I was trying to survive. I tapped the pen against the blank line on the invitation again. Parents of the bride. The words sat there like a challenge. Ethan was in the kitchen, opening a soda, pretending not to watch me think too hard. You're going to dent the paper, he said. I set the pen down. I don't know what to write. He didn't ask why. He already knew. That night I drove to the Waverly house without calling first. It was a Tuesday. No dinner, no big gathering. Just lights on in the windows and Thomas's truck in the driveway. Evelyn opened the door in slippers. You look serious, she said. Come in. We sat at the kitchen table. No tea, no small talk. Just the sound of the refrigerator humming and a wall clock that ticked too loudly. I'm getting married, I said. Evelyn smiled. I know. I blinked. Ethan told you. She lifted one shoulder. He was terrible at pretending otherwise. I nodded once, then said the real thing. I don't know who to put as my parents on the invitation. Evelyn didn't react. Not with surprise, not with pity, she just waited. I swallowed. My biological parents removed me from their lives. They don't call, they don't ask. They didn't even notice I stopped trying. I paused. But I also don't want to lie. I won't put names there that don't belong. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. There's something I haven't brought up again because it's not something you suggest lightly, she said. But you deserve to know all your options. I looked at her. When I worked as a JAG officer, she said I handled adult adoptions. Not common, but very real, very legal. It allows a consenting adult to be adopted into a family permanently. New legal parents, new next of kin status, new birth certificate. I sat still processing. You mean, I said slowly, a chosen family can be recognized by law? Yes, she said, if that's something the adult wants. No pressure, no expectation, just information. I exhaled through my nose, half disbelieving. That's a real thing. It is, she said. And it exists for exactly the kind of situation you're in. When the family you built is the family that actually raised you into who you became. I stared at the wood grain of the table. I didn't picture revenge. I didn't picture my mother's face. I didn't picture a wedding confrontation. I pictured Sunday dinners, Thomas saving me a seat, kids calling me Aunt Riley, Karen handing me a dish towel, Ethan driving 2 hours to pick me up on a highway in the middle of the night. People who showed up, consistently, quietly, without conditions. I need time to think, I said. Evelyn nodded. Take all the time you need. Over the next 2 weeks, I thought about it everywhere. On base, in the gym, in the shower, in line at the grocery store. I imagined calling my father and telling him. I imagined his silence. His soft, passive voice telling me he understood without doing anything to change the past. I imagined my mother's outrage, my sister's smirk, their sudden interest in a daughter they had ignored. Then I imagined writing their names on an invitation, smiling for photos, pretending history didn't exist. One of those futures felt honest. The other felt like stepping back into a role that had nearly erased me. Sunday came again. I walked into the Waverly dining room. The table was already set. My chair was already pulled out. No one asked why I looked nervous. We ate. We argued about whether cornbread counted as bread or dessert. We laughed when Thomas tried to tell a joke and forgot the ending. After dinner, Evelyn started clearing plates. I stood and helped without thinking. We worked side by side at the sink. I've decided, I said. She didn't stop washing. I want to do it, I said. If you and Thomas are willing. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands slowly, then hugged me. We've considered you our daughter for a long time, she said. We didn't want to suggest it first. It had to be your choice. Thomas, who had absolutely been eavesdropping from the doorway, cleared his throat. I guess that makes me officially in charge of dad jokes, he said. Terrifying responsibility. I laughed. And for the first time, the word daughter didn't feel like a performance. The legal process was not dramatic. No courtroom speech, no swelling music, paperwork, forms, ID verification. Background checks. A short hearing in front of a judge who had clearly done this before. Ethan sat beside me in the waiting area, tapping his foot. Thomas adjusted his tie. Karen whispered to the kids to behave. Evelyn reviewed documents one last time, professional and calm. When my name was called, we walked into a small courtroom. The judge asked simple questions. Did I consent? Did they consent? Was there any coercion? Did I understand this created a permanent legal parent-child relationship? I answered clearly, yes, yes, yes. When the judge signed the order, there was no applause, no audience, no photo op, just a stamp, a signature, and a clerk handing us copies of the finalized paperwork. Outside the courthouse, Thomas hugged me first. My daughter, he said, like it had always been true. Evelyn brushed a tear away quickly. Welcome home, Riley Waverly. The name felt strange for about 3 seconds, then it fit. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a new birth certificate. Name Riley Waverly. Parents Evelyn Waverly and Thomas Waverly. I held the paper in my hands and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for decades. Not anger, not sadness, release. That night I placed the document in a folder with my wedding plans. Then I opened my laptop and typed, Parents of the bride, Evelyn and Thomas Waverly. No hesitation, no doubt, no apology. Just truth written in plain black letters. I adjusted my uniform one last time before stepping out of the car. Not because I needed to, because habits die hard. Even in a suit, I still checked my posture like someone might inspect me. The wedding venue sat on a stretch of Virginia countryside, clean and open white chairs lined in perfect rows. Soft music floated across the lawn. Guests arrived in clusters, laughing, greeting each other, holding small gift bags and sunglasses. Ethan was already inside with Thomas, pretending to help with last-minute details, while mostly just trying not to look nervous. Evelyn moved through the space with quiet authority, the way only someone who had run both courtrooms and family kitchens could. I stood in a small side room, tying my shoes, slowly breathing evenly. No shaking hands, no racing heart, just focus. There was security at the entrance, subtle, professional, standard procedure when a large group of service members gathered in one place. Nothing dramatic, just prevention. I knew logically my biological family didn't have an invitation. I also knew they lived only a few hours away. People who feel entitled don't usually respect boundaries just because they were stated clearly. I didn't think about it much after that. Not because I forgot. Because the day in front of me was bigger than the day behind me. Karen poked her head into the room. Time, she said. Thomas offered his arm outside the door. Not stiff, not ceremonial, just steady. You ready, kiddo? He asked. I nodded. We walked down the aisle together. Guests stood, smiled, some cried. A few of my soldiers snapped pictures like proud older siblings. Ethan waited at the front, trying to look calm and failing just enough to be endearing. The ceremony was simple, vows written in plain words, promises that sounded like adults speaking honestly, not characters in a movie. When Ethan said, "I choose you," I believed him. Not because he said it on a wedding day, because he'd said it in 100 quiet ways before. When I said, "I choose you," I meant it without fear of being too much. The officiant pronounced us married. Applause rose, people hugged, someone whistled. The kids ran in circles before Karen caught them. Normal chaos, healthy chaos. We moved to the reception hall. Food stations, music, drinks, laughter bouncing off wooden beams. For a while, I didn't think about anything except dancing badly with Ethan, while Thomas clapped off beat and Evelyn laughed into her wine glass. Then a security guard approached. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "there are 2 individuals at the entrance claiming to be your parents." I looked at him, not surprised, just aware. Ethan stepped closer. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I didn't need long to decide. "Let them in," I said. "Seat them in the back." The guard nodded and left without further questions. No rush, no panic, no confrontation yet. Just a decision made cleanly. A few minutes later I spotted them. Deborah and Michael Hart stood near the back wall, stiff and uncertain. My mother wore a dress that tried too hard. My father's hands stayed in his pockets like he wanted to disappear. They looked around the room full of strangers celebrating a daughter they no longer knew. No one recognized them. No one greeted them. No one saved them seats. They were just 2 late guests at a wedding where they had no place. The MC stepped onto the small stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." The room quieted. I stood beside Ethan, champagne in hand, body relaxed, eyes forward. The MC smiled. "Before we continue the celebration, we'd like to recognize the parents of the bride." My mother straightened instantly. Of course she did. That reflex had been trained for decades. My father glanced at her, then at me, unsure. The MC continued. "Please give a warm welcome to Evelyn and Thomas Waverly." Applause broke out. Cheers, whistles. Thomas lifted his glass in acknowledgement. Evelyn waved gracefully, smiling at the crowd, like she'd been preparing for this role her whole life. Across the room, my mother's expression froze. Confusion first, then disbelief, then realization, slow and heavy. My father blinked hard, once, twice, like his mind was catching up to what his ears had just heard. To every person in that room, Evelyn and Thomas were simply the parents of the bride. Nothing more needed to be explained. Nothing hinted that 2 other people existed who shared my DNA. My mother leaned toward my father. "What did he just say?" she whispered sharply. My father didn't answer. He didn't need to. She looked around, at the guests, at the decorations, at the photos on display of me with the Waverly family over the years. Pictures of Sunday dinners, holidays, smiling children climbing onto my lap, Ethan and me at base events, Thomas teaching me to carve a turkey, Evelyn and me in the kitchen. Evidence of a life built without them. My mother pushed through the crowd before hesitation could stop her. My father followed slower, shoulders heavy. She reached me just as applause faded. "Riley," she said, voice tight. "Who are those people?" I looked at her. Not angry, not smug, just steady. "My parents," I said. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You can't just replace us," she hissed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You told me not to come home," I said. "You chose peace without me in it. I built peace somewhere else." People nearby had gone quiet. Not gossip quiet. Respectful quiet. The kind that gives space instead of feeding drama. My father finally spoke. "Riley," he said. Voice rough. "I didn't know." I met his eyes. "You knew," I said. "You just didn't stop it," he flinched. "Because truth lands clean when there's no shouting." My mother turned toward Evelyn. "You," she snapped. "You took my daughter." Evelyn stepped forward. Not aggressively, just firmly. "No," she said. We opened a door. She walked through it. Thomas came to my side, placing a hand on my shoulder. "She's our daughter," he said. "By choice, by law, by love." The security guard moved closer, reading the situation calmly. I lifted a hand. "Thank you for coming," I said to my biological parents. "But this is my wedding. You're not guests here." My mother stared at me as if searching for the girl who used to apologize for existing. She didn't find her. My father's eyes filled, but no words came. Maybe they were too late. Maybe they had nowhere to land. Security escorted them gently toward the exit. No shouting, no scene. Just removal of people who did not belong in a space they did not build. As the doors closed behind them, the room exhaled. Music resumed. Glasses clinked. Conversation restarted. Life continued. Ethan leaned in. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I am," I said. And I meant it. Not because something ended, but because everything that mattered was already here, alive and moving in a room filled with people who chose to stay. I stood at the kitchen counter the morning after the wedding, tying my hair back while Ethan made coffee. The house was quiet. Not empty quiet. Peaceful quiet. The kind that doesn't make you brace for impact. My phone sat on the counter. No missed calls from my biological family. No angry voicemails. No dramatic texts. Just silence. And for the first time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. That's when I realized something important. The confrontation at my wedding wasn't the victory. The victory was everything that came before it. The slow decisions, the quiet choices, the moments where I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. So I want to talk directly to you now. Not as a character in a story, not as someone performing strength, just as a woman who learned some lessons the hard way. Because if you're watching this, there's a good chance you've heard at least one of these phrases. "Stop being dramatic, you're too sensitive." "Why do you always make everything about you?" "Family is family no matter what." Those phrases aren't harmless, they're tools. Tools used to keep you quiet when your needs are inconvenient, to make you doubt your perception, to keep power where it's always been. Here's the first lesson I learned: being labeled drama doesn't mean you're the problem. In my family, drama didn't mean yelling or chaos. It meant asking questions. It meant wanting fairness. It meant not pretending everything was fine. If your family only has peace when you stay silent, that peace isn't real. It's compliance. Real peace can handle honesty. Here's the second lesson: you don't need to earn love by shrinking. For years, I thought being loved meant being easy, agreeable, low maintenance, invisible when necessary, helpful at all times, apologetic by default. But love that requires you to erase yourself isn't love, it's control. Healthy relationships don't demand you become smaller, they make room for you. Here's the third lesson. Boundaries are not punishment, a boundary isn't. "You hurt me, so now I'll hurt you." A boundary is, "This behavior isn't acceptable in my life." That's it. No shouting required, no explanation essay, no justification speech. Just a line drawn where your well-being matters. And yes, people who benefited from you having no boundaries will call this cruelty. They'll call it abandonment. They'll call it betrayal. That doesn't make it true. It makes it inconvenient for them. I didn't cut contact to get revenge. I cut contact because I finally understood that love shouldn't feel like walking on glass. Now let's talk practical. Because stories are nice, but you live in real life. With real parents, real siblings, real obligations, real fear of being the bad one. So here are things that helped me, not theory, practice. 1. Identify the pattern, not the incident. A single holiday rejection hurt, but the real damage was decades of being deprioritized. Ask yourself, is this a one-time mistake, or is this a repeating pattern? Healthy families repair. Unhealthy families repeat. 2. Stop arguing with someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. If every explanation becomes another weapon used against you, stop explaining. Silence is not surrender. It's refusing to participate in a rigged game. 3. Choose people who show up consistently, not dramatically. Not grand gestures. Not apologies after damage. Not promises during guilt. Just presence, over time. Without conditions. That's how you recognize safe people. 4. Let guilt pass through you without obeying it. Guilt is an emotion, not a command. You're allowed to feel guilty and still do what's right for you. 5. Redefine family. Family can be people who feed you when you're hungry, people who ask how you're doing and wait for the answer, people who don't disappear when you're inconvenient. DNA is information, behavior is relationship. Now I know some of you are thinking, but they're still my parents, but they did their best, but they had a hard life. All of that might be true, and you're still allowed to protect yourself. Understanding someone's limitations doesn't require you to live inside them. Another thing I learned, forgiveness is not access. You can forgive someone and still not let them sit at your table. You can understand their wounds and still not hand them the knife again. Now here's something people don't say enough. If you were the scapegoat child, you were not difficult. You were the one who noticed things, the one who questioned things, the one who didn't pretend. That's not weakness, that's clarity. And clarity is dangerous in families built on denial. I didn't build a new family out of spite. I built it because once I knew what real connection felt like, I refused to go back to substitutes. That's not revenge. That's growth. That's survival. And if your story doesn't look exactly like mine, that's fine. Your details will be different, your names, your holidays, your breaking point. But the principle is the same. You're allowed to choose peace over chaos. You're allowed to choose yourself over loyalty that only flows one direction. You're allowed to leave rooms where your presence is treated as a problem. And most importantly, you're allowed to build something better. Not someday. Not after they change. Not after one more attempt. Now. I lifted my daughter from her crib and settled her against my shoulder. She smelled like baby shampoo and warm blankets. She yawned, tiny fist pressing into my collarbone, trusting completely that the arms holding her were safe. Ethan was in the kitchen, arguing with Thomas about how to cut a melon the efficient way, which apparently required a level of engineering no melon deserved. Evelyn laughed at them both. The kids chased each other through the living room. Someone dropped a spoon. No one yelled. This was my normal now. Not perfect, not quiet, not controlled by fear, just real. I sat in the rocking chair and watched my daughter's eyes close. And a thought came without effort. She will never wonder if she's wanted. Not because I'm a perfect mother, not because this family never makes mistakes, but because love here is not conditional on being small. And that's where I want to leave you. Not in the past, not in confrontation, not in revenge. In the part where life continues. Because if you've stayed with this story until now, there's a reason. Something in it probably felt familiar. Maybe too familiar. So let's talk plainly one last time. Healing from family trauma is not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's a series of choices that feel ordinary when you make them. You stop explaining yourself. You stop begging for acknowledgement. You stop chasing people who move the finish line every time you reach it. And then you start choosing differently. Here's what helped me most when the story ended and real life began. First, accept that some people will never understand your decision. Not your parents, not your siblings, not extended family, not mutual friends. They'll say things like, you only get one family. You'll regret this one day. You're tearing the family apart. But families don't break because one person sets a boundary. They break because there was already a fracture no one wanted to face. If someone can only love you when you're compliant, they're not mourning you. They're mourning control. Let them. You don't need their agreement to live your life. Second, Build your support system intentionally. Chosen family doesn't always appear in a restaurant on a holiday. Sometimes it's a coworker who checks on you, a friend who listens without fixing, a mentor who sees your potential, a partner who doesn't flinch at your history, a therapist who teaches you language for what you lived. Collect people who show up consistently, not intensely, not dramatically, just consistently. That's how safety is built. Third, learn to sit with discomfort without obeying it. When you set a boundary, guilt will come. Anxiety will come. Second guessing will come. Those feelings don't mean you're wrong. They mean you're doing something new. Discomfort is often the price of change. Don't confuse familiarity with health. Fourth, redefine what respect means. Respect is not obedience. Respect is not silence. Respect is not tolerating harm. Real respect is mutual. It allows disagreement. It allows boundaries. It allows truth. If someone demands respect but cannot return it, they're asking for submission, not relationship. Fifth, if you become a parent, break the cycle on purpose. You will feel old instincts rise. The urge to control, the urge to dismiss feelings, the urge to minimize needs. Pause there. Apologize when you get it wrong. Listen when it's inconvenient. Make room instead of demanding smallness. That's how cycles end. Not with grand declarations, with daily behavior. Now I want to say something that many people need to hear directly. You do not owe lifelong access to people who repeatedly harmed you. Not because of blood, not because of tradition, not because they're still your parents. Relationship is earned through behavior, not biology. And you're allowed to step away without hatred, without revenge, without cruelty. You're allowed to leave quietly. I don't hate my biological family. I don't wish them harm. I don't replay arguments in my head anymore. They simply do not have a role in my life. That's all. No war, no drama, no ongoing performance. Just absence where there was once pressure, and presence where there was once loneliness. One night not long ago, Ethan asked me something as we sat on the porch after everyone had gone home. Do you ever wonder if they changed? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes, I said. But not enough to reopen the door. People rarely change without consequence. And boundaries are part of consequence. Not punishment, not revenge, just reality. I looked down at my daughter sleeping in my arms, at the house full of noise behind me, at the man beside me who chose me without condition. And I knew something with certainty. I didn't lose a family. I left a role that never fit, and built a life that finally does. So if you're watching this and you're standing at your own version of that moment, the one where you're deciding whether to keep shrinking or start choosing yourself, I'll leave you with this. You don't need to be invited back to a table that never saved you a seat. You're allowed to build your own, and you're not alone in doing it. A final note, this story contains some fictional details to enhance the drama and emotion. But the lessons and patterns we address are entirely real and still happen to many people every day. If this style doesn't suit you, that's okay. Find other content that better fits your needs.